Well, I'm super excited. In today's video, we're going to check out the new Fronius Wattpilot electric vehicle charger. Now, there's three models of these Wattpilot chargers. Today, we're going to have a look specifically at the Wattpilot Go, which I believe is a unique product in Australia, or globally for that matter, because it's a smart charger and it's portable. So you can use it at home or you can take it on the road with you. So stay with us. Hi everyone, welcome to Electric Car Australia, the Aussie YouTube channel for those wanting to learn a little bit more about electric vehicles and also sustainable living technologies. Now you'll probably from the background work out we're in the shed today. So where I normally do my inside videos is in the home office, and the window's right near a new pool that we've put in. And the kids are in the pool this afternoon, so it's a little bit noisy. So I've come up to the shed, which is only about 20 metres away from the pool anyway. So throughout the video, you'll probably hear them having a great time in the background. Now look, without further ado, as I mentioned, we're here today to have a look at the Fronius Wattpilot Go. So we're going to do an unboxing, and I don't normally do unboxings. I think it's a bit of a weird concept, but I just wanted to show you guys what is in the box when it comes. And I should, in full disclosure, let you know that Fronius has provided me this charger to put it through its paces, but please rest assured it will still be a critical independent type review. So today we're just going to have a look at the charger and what comes in the box, and we'll talk through some of the specs and stats and all that sort of stuff. But over the next few months I will be putting this through its paces. We'll be mounting it on the wall here at home. I've got an adapter cable that I've ordered and I'm waiting on. I'll also be taking it out on the road. So if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to the channel, hit that bell icon, and you'll be notified when all of the new videos go up. And in particular, if you're interested in this charger, some of those practical ones when it's actually in use. So something I'll also mention up front, speaking to Fronius Australia, the sales model for this particular product at the moment will be through Fronius wholesalers or resellers. So basically the same guys that install your Fronius solar PV systems, that's where you'll be able to buy this product. So at the moment it's not going to be direct to consumers, but that may change in the future. Okay, so without further ado, let's get into it and see what's in the box. So as I mentioned, your installer is probably going to get the box like this. However, we'll just have a look what comes in it. And apologies for my studio lighting here. I've just done the best I can to try and beef up the lighting so you guys can see. So I went to do the unboxing and it all fell on the floor, etc. So let's just scrap that and let's just go through the contents that your installer would see in the box. So first up, there's a little solar brochure from Fronius. So it tells you a little bit about their solar systems and how their Wattpilot is a great addition to that, how it can leverage that. You've also got a quick start guide, which is great. Just has some brief information in it in there, but the key thing is your QR code there, so you can scan that and download the full manual and have a good read through that, which I've done, and it is a really good manual. The other couple of things in there, obviously you've got some mounting screws, mounting hardware, little bits and pieces, and you've got an RFID card and also a like an installation setup type card. So we'll just have a quick look at that one. There you go. So I'll keep my finger over the details there so you can't see that, but a little card, you scan that and it's got a heap of pin numbers and that sort of stuff to set it up. So your installer will do that for you. And here is the little RFID card. Now you can also get extra ones of those, so if you needed more of those, you just buy those off Fronius, and we'll talk a little bit more later on about the benefit of that. That's the boring stuff. This is the really exciting stuff. So this is the Wattpilot Go. This is a 22 kilowatt single phase or three phase, so up to 22 kilowatt three phase portable EVSE, so an electric vehicle supply equipment. And as we always say in our videos, this isn't a charger, this is an EVSE. The charger's under the bonnet in your car, but most people call them a charger, so for the purposes of this video we will as well, but I will include a link to a video above where we explain this a little bit more. So look, there it is, 5-pin Australian 3-phase plug. Comes out the top there. I think that's 6mm core cable, so nice and heavy. The unit itself's about 2.5 kilos, but we'll have a look at that a bit more when we have a look at some of the features. It looks like a really good quality unit. It's plastic. I'm assuming it's got a decent impact rating on it. Well sealed for water. It's an IP55 rating, so that means it's splash proof, so it's an indoor-outdoor unit. You can put it in the rain, you can splash a hose over it, etc. You certainly wouldn't submerge it in water. Little switch there, we'll talk a bit more about this shortly, but you can sort of manually control it there or via an app. Little RFID sensor there, type 2 socket inside there. We'll talk more about that later. This one you can also mount on your house, so the mounting plate comes off the back there, so that's a plastic plate. You'd screw that onto the wall of your shed or your house. Obviously that's the back of the EVSE or the charger, slips on there. So when you want it at home, you leave it mounted there, and when you want to hit the road and take it with you, you just lift it up and pull it away like that. So great optionality and versatility there. So before we get into the specs, a little bit of history of why I'm so excited about this one. So if you've watched many of our other videos, we didn't really need a faster home charger. We just used the 10 amp or the 15 amp granny chargers. So 10 amp puts in about 8 to 10 kilometers of range per hour. The 15 amp puts in about 15 to 18 kilometres of range per hour. Now for most of our use that was okay, so we just charge through the day. If the sun was out or if we're at work and had the car at work, we'd charge overnight on the regular grid tariff. That was okay. But look, over time, once we got our grid connected solar system, and I'll include a link above where we talk about that, we recently got one of those installed. Prior to that, we for about 12 years we had an off-grid 4 kilowatt system, which wasn't quite big enough to charge the car. So once we got the on-grid system, we found more and more that we might have used the car all day, it was low on charge, we'd come home and then we'd want to go to the Gold Coast the next day, and unfortunately overnight on those slower charges it just wasn't enough charge for the next day. So on those odd occasions, we'd have to go to a public rapid charger, of which we've got a lot around here, but we thought it just would be more convenient to have a home fast charger. So given that some of them are quite expensive, the stock standard sort of one in Australia at the moment is the Tesla Gen 3 charger. Now they're about $750 plus installation. But they're not solar integrated, so basically you plug it in, you turn it on, it goes flat out until the car's charged and then it turns off. So if you go the next step up and you want a smart charger that can integrate with your solar and basically just charge your car on cheaper solar, then the prices go up. So you're starting at sort of $1,200–1,500 plus installation. And the other thing about that was, I thought if I'm spending that sort of money and I'm screwing that charger to the wall at home, then when we hit the road, I can't actually take it with me. So one of the disadvantages, the MG ZS EV, which is the cheapest EV you can buy in Australia, it does only have a reasonably small battery. So we've got about a 42 kilowatt hour usable battery. So as you might have seen in my last video when I went out to Kingaroy, I actually run out of charge. So if I had a portable charger similar to this one, I could take that, throw it in the boot, and at any 3-phase outlet or 32 amp single phase outlet, I could plug in and I could have a fast charge. So to cut a long story short, I wanted a smart charger that was also a mobile charger or a portable charger. And I started to look around, and I was actually shocked to find that I couldn't find one. So please, if anybody knows of any, put it in the show notes, because I'd love to share that with our viewers, but I couldn't find any. I could find basically dumb chargers. So there was chargers that would do 7 kilowatts single phase or 22 kilowatts 3-phase, but they were just dumb chargers. So you plugged it in, it went flat out, and then it turned off. So this is where I got really excited. These ones have been out in Europe for a couple of years. There's been a couple of different versions and models. So I reached out to Fronius about 6-8 months ago, and I said, hey guys, when's this coming to Australia? Because I said, I'm in the market for a portable smart charger, and I really like the look of this. So we kept in touch, and just recently Fronius have got back in touch, and they said, look, we're launching it in Australia. We'd be happy to send you a product so you could test it and put it through its paces, give us some feedback, etc., and also share it with your viewers. So here it is, and that's why I'm so excited that this charger does everything I need it to do, and it's a home charger and a portable charger. So now let's get into the specs and just see what this baby can do. So I'll put some screenshots up on the screen like usual, because I think that helps you guys as you're listening to me babble on. You can also have a look at some of those specs. So as I mentioned at the start of the video, there's a couple of models of the Fronius Wattpilot charger. So there's two home-based models. So these models you screw to the wall on your house or in your garage, and you don't take them away. They don't come off. They're not portable. So there's an 11 kilowatt 3-phase home charger, and there's a 22 kilowatt home charger. They're great if you want to compare those with some of the other home smart chargers on the market. By all means do that. But for me, that wasn't really what I was after. As I mentioned, there's a lot of other smart home chargers on the market. What I was really interested in was the portable one, and that's what this one is. So the third model in the range is the Wattpilot Go, and it's a 22 kilowatt charger, 3-phase. So lots of people will be going, what are you doing buying that with an MG ZS EV? Because it can only charge on single phase 7 kilowatt maximum, and that's limited by the charger that's underneath the bonnet of the car. But the great thing about this product, as I mentioned, it's smart and it's also self-aware. So no matter what you plug this into, whether it be the power source you plug it into or the vehicle you plug it into, this unit here will detect what it's working with and it'll self-adjust itself. So we'll talk a bit more about that shortly, but that's a huge advantage. So even if you've got a cheap EV like us, this is perfectly suited. Or if you've got a Tesla, for instance, and you can take those 22 kilowatt 3-phase, you can also use it for that. So let's have a bit more of a look at those specs. So I'll just briefly go through the Wattpilot Home as well. So as I mentioned, we've got an 11 kilowatt 16 amp version of that one, and I'll put the stats up on the screen. We've got the Wattpilot 22 kilowatt 3-phase 32 amp. Again, that's the home charger. But the one that I'll mainly talk about today, as I mentioned, is the Wattpilot Go 22 kilowatts, 32 amps maximum. That's a 3-phase 5-pin plug, as I showed you before there. And it comes with 30 centimeters of cable. So that gives you a bit of an idea, and we'll show this in one of our future videos when we mount this on the wall of the house and we show you the adapter cable we need, etc. Because here at home, we've only got single phase. So I've installed a 3-pin 32 amp single phase plug or socket. I get them mixed up back to front, but anyway, a plug on the wall. So we need an adapter cable so we can go from the 3-pin 32 amp single phase into 5-pin 32 amp 3-phase. So all that will come in another video. If you buy the home version, there's about a 1.8 meter of cable, and your installer will install it and they'll obviously conduit it, put the cable in and stuff. But this one just has a little short 30 centimeter tail. It has type 2 infrastructure, and we'll talk a bit more about that shortly, because some of that's quite important. There's a mechanical lock on it, so as with any of these chargers, when you turn it on and it energizes, communicates, it locks the lead in. A residual current device, so unlike some of the cheap Chinese ones, and I'll put a link to our video that we done with a EV charger install specialist, where we talked a little bit about buying some of those cheap Chinese chargers online. Some of those don't have these protections and RCDs in them that you need. This one does, so it has a 20 milliamp AC and a 6 milliamp DC integrated RCD in the device, so that's a bonus for safety. And as I mentioned before, there's 6mm square copper cables. A couple of other things, it dynamically manages surplus PV charging, and again we'll talk about that shortly, but for me that was fantastic. It's indoor outdoor use, as we mentioned. It hangs upright, IP55, so as I said, splash proof. The size of it, so it's 287 by 155 by 109, so you can sort of see there, I guess, the palm of my hand, the size of it. It's not going to take up a lot of room in your boot. That's again one of the things that I was interested in. It's not that heavy, so it only adds a couple of kilos to the load of the car. The interesting thing with this one is that you do need to have your separate lead, and we'll talk a bit more about that shortly. But as you can see, obviously it doesn't have the lead to plug into your car. Look, another thing that's really critical, I think, here in Australia, the operating temperatures before it derates. So it'll happily work between minus 25 degrees Celsius and up to plus 40 degrees Celsius. Now, I don't know what plus 40 means. I guess it means just over 40. So I think you could probably bet that this will happily work up to, say, 41, 42 degrees before it starts to derate. And what I mean by derate is the unit, it'll still work. It's not like it's going to shut down, but what it'll do, it'll lower the power output to protect itself, basically. So let's say it might halve the output to keep going. Fronius do make the point that that's if it's not in direct sunlight. So again, any of these sort of electronic things, it makes sense to try and have them shaded, whether that's put them in the shade if it's portable, or whether it's have some sort of shading over it. So what I'd like to do now is talk a little bit about the single phase, three phase. So as I mentioned, this is a, and this is just me making these words up, a self-aware charger. So it's aware of the power source you plug it into, and it's also aware of the EV you plug it into. And the little smarts inside here make decisions on what that is, and it says, right, this is what the energy I'm getting, this is the car I'm plugged into, and it'll decide what to do. So as I mentioned, I only have single phase power. So even though this is a 3-phase 22 kilowatt charger, I can't use it at that capability, but I can still use it as a single phase 7 kilowatt 32 amp charger, which is exactly what I was looking for. But to do that, as I mentioned, I will need an adapter lead, and like I said, we're going to do a future video. We'll actually do a couple of videos. One will be a complete video on different types of adapter leads, what to look out for, how much they cost, and all that sort of stuff. So as I mentioned, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss that. Unfortunately, at the moment, I don't have my adapter lead, so I can't show you that in this video, but it is on order. But Fronius have chosen to just supply this with a 5-pin 3-phase plug, which I think is a smart move, because in most portable instances, that's what you're going to find. So you won't find many of the 32 amp single phase plugs like I've put on the wall around the place. If you go to showgrounds or industrial businesses, panel beaters, that sort of stuff, they're going to have 3-phase plugs. So I think it's a smart move. Fronius have put the 3-phase plug on it, and if you want to use anything else, you just have an adapter. And because there's multiple different pin plugs out there, you can have 3-pin, 4-pin, 5-pin. It's a great idea to have a selection of adapters depending on what your needs are. And finally, just on those adapter leads, Fronius have made the note there, they're thinking about actually providing those as a aftermarket accessory. So they may or may not do that, but please be aware that basically any electrician could make that up for you if you explain to them what you need. And in particular, your Fronius installer that installs this for you, they would even be able to make it up for you. So you can also buy them online. So again, we're going to do a video of a business that sells these online, so readily available, so no problems at all getting these adapter leads. So let's talk a little bit about the charging lead. So as I mentioned before, this is the socket where the Type 2 lead goes in, and I haven't bothered to grab mine out of the car, it's buried in the boot. But as well as buying this, you'll obviously need a Type 2 to Type 2 lead. So one end plugs in here, one end plugs into your car. Now look, most people will probably already have one of those if you've got an EV. I've already got one because I use it down at my local Coles supermarket, and anywhere there's a Type 2 AC charger, destination, sometimes at motels, hotels, that sort of stuff. So yes, you need a Type 2 to Type 2 lead to use with this, but like I said, most people will have one. So to have a quick look, and this is probably a little bit of overkill for this video, but I thought it was interesting. And by the way, most of these slides come from Fronius's recent webinar. So they had a webinar launching this as a new product. I'll include a link in the show notes. So if you actually want to go and watch that webinar and listen to one of the Fronius guys explaining this, they go into a bit more detail. The webinar is mainly for installers, so there's a little bit of stuff there that might go over your head, as this slide might when I just walk through this, but I thought it was interesting and I'll just run through it. So quickly, that's your Type 2 plugs. So those top couple of pins there, the CP and the PP, they're basically communication plugs, so we won't go into too much of what they do, but they communicate with your vehicle, so every Type 2 plug has those. L1 is, I think, live one, so that's your first phase. L2 is your second phase, if you've got 3-phase. L3 is your live third phase. PE in the middle, that's your earth, that center pin. And the one on my right-hand side here is the N for neutral. So that Type 2 plug has 3 phases in it, plus a neutral, an earth, and 2 communication ports. So as shown there, that Type 2 can do 2.3 kilowatts, 11 kilowatts, or 22 kilowatts. So that's the range of charging capacity. So to go a little more down the rabbit hole on Type 2 standards, I thought I'd just pop this slide in there. As I mentioned, if you want a little bit more information on this, go and have a look at the Fronius webinar, because it is quite interesting if you're into this nerdy, geeky stuff. The Type 2 is a European standard that came out, as it mentions there, about 2013. It is the global standard now for AC charging, so it's becoming more and more popular. As it mentions there, they're the 2 things that the communication ports are used for, so I won't go into them there, but that gives you a bit of an indication. But basically that's it. So it's sort of stop-start the car, determine the energy capacity that the car can receive, but it doesn't look at state of charge or any of that sort of stuff. So luckily, that's all done now in the Wattpilot for us. So for me, this is where the real exciting stuff starts to happen with these chargers. So for me, there's about 4 main charging modes. Now I know there's different combinations, but the 4 main ones for me is it has the functionality to be able to start and stop charging. So there's a time-based charging setup. There's also a setup based on current, so you can set it based on charging current, so that's a second charge mode. Then there's a surplus solar charge mode. So this is, again, what I'm really excited about, and we'll talk more about how that works. So within that surplus solar charging, there's a couple of subcategories, I guess. There's an eco charge and there's a next ride charge. So we'll briefly talk about that. And then there's just flat out full on. So that's the 4th mode. If you need a charge and you need it super urgent, you plug it in and away you go. So we'll talk about the time one a little bit later when we have a look at the app interface. But this one here looks at the charge current. So you can set a slow and steady charge current similar to what you do on your granny charger with 2.3 kilowatts or something like that, or you can set it at a faster one up to 22 kilowatts if you've got three-phase services. So you can set your charge current to what you want, and the beauty of this one is that you can do it in the app, or you can do it manually using the button here. So again, we'll show all this functionality once we get this set up, installed. We'll do another video and we'll show you all that sort of stuff. But in this video, you can press this button here, and on the screen there, it'll show you the steps that it goes up. And down the side there's some little LED lighting as well that will light up, and that gives you an indication of the current. I guess one observation where this differs from some of the other chargers, smart chargers on the market, the home chargers, like the Zappy, etc., they have a LED screen, so you can actually see the detail on the charger. So I guess this one's a little bit halfway. If you want that detail, you do need to read that through the app. However, what I do like is that you can still manually operate it, and it still does give you an indication around the little, with the LEDs around the socket there. And for me, what I would do, because I'd forget how many LEDs meant what, I would get a little marker and I would actually mark on there that, let's say 3 LEDs is 2.3 kilowatts, 6 LEDs is 5, etc, etc. And maybe that's a point for Fronius to actually just have some little markings around there, so you can clearly see where the LEDs are at and the charging capacity. So let's have a look at the surplus solar charging. Now, I think this is going to be really, really useful for anyone with solar that, like I said, they want a home EV charger, but they also want the flexibility like me to be able to take it on the road. So if you've got, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but if you've got a Fronius inverter with a smart meter, this will just connect straight away. There is third-party integrations that'll be happening a little bit later, but not quite here yet. So as we mentioned, there's two sub-modes there. There's an eco mode and a next ride mode. Now, as I mentioned, these chargers will flick between single phase and three phase themselves. So if you have a look at that table there, let's say you've got a three phase house. What it'll do when the sun comes up and you've got some excess solar, so i.e. your solar generation is above what you're consuming in your house, the first phase, so the single phase 6 amp, let's call it step, will kick in. So it'll start charging at 1.38 kilowatts. So that's the minimum that this charger will work at in eco mode. So if I set it in eco mode and I only want it to charge using solar, there needs to be at least 1.4 kilowatts being generated as excess solar before it'll kick in. So if you hit 1.4, bang, charger kicks in, single phase, and it's given you 6 amps at 1.4. Then it'll go up 8 amps, 10 amps, as you can see in the table. Now, what happens if you've got three phase? It'll work on that single first phase up until it hits 32 amps, single phase at about 7.3 kilowatts. And then the three phases will kick in. So then you'll go back to the start of that table on that bottom line, and you'll be getting 4.14 kilowatts across three phases. So the charger itself is managing all that. You don't need to think about it. So the advantage of that is if you've got three phase, you can actually start charging at 1.4 kilowatts single phase, and then it'll just ramp right up until, as you see on the far right hand side, bottom row, you'll be getting 22 kilowatts across three phases there. So really powerful portable charger. If you're like myself and just on single phase, again, it'll kick in at 1.4. So as soon as my solar is generating 1.4 excess, it will kick in and it'll go right up until I get 7.3 kilowatts or 32 amps, and that will max out. And that's fine for me because that's the maximum the MG can take anyway. So we'll talk about the next trip mode shortly, but I just wanted to show you guys these couple of slides. So it sort of demonstrates what I was talking about there. So you can see down on that graph on the duck curve there on the far right hand side where it's got one phase, you can see it's nice and controlled. You've got 1 amp steps there, so as you get another amp of solar generation, the charger will bump up an amp. So it's really maximizing what your excess solar generation is. And then once it kicks into 3-phase, it goes up in larger jumps, which is understandable because you've got three phases. So if we just look at that duck curve graph there, what's happened there is the sun's come up at 7 a.m. The PV system has started generating power, and then the car's been plugged in at about 2:30 there. So the car's plugged in, there's a huge amount of excess solar, so it kicks in 3-phase, all's good. It's pumping in 6 kilowatts across 3 phases, so that'll be your 22 kilowatts. And then as the sun goes down, you can see that the Wattpilot is gradually reducing the charge capacity to make sure that it's not pulling any power from the grid. So that, as solar owners, that's what we want. We don't want to be pulling power from the grid if we don't need to, and that's where the eco mode solar aware benefit is. And there's another graph that shows a little bit more about it. Now you'll notice the variable energy tariffs and the asterisk there to say that that's only available in Germany and Austria. So look, here in Australia and New Zealand, you can ignore that. But basically what that is where your electricity network provider allows some communications between your meter, so your smart meter and service, and basically when there's cheap electricity in the system or in the network, it will also use that. So it uses your solar first, and then it will use some of that cheap variable energy. But as I mentioned, not available here. So for the purposes of this, you're only looking at the excess solar generation. So now we talk about next trip. Now this is also a really useful charging mode, I think, because what this does, you can set the Wattpilot up, again via the app, which we'll have a look at shortly, to only charge your vehicle to the amount of energy that you need for your next trip. So for instance, if we're going down the Gold Coast and we only need 150 kilometres worth of energy in the battery, that's all we do. That's all we need in there. There's no point in charging it up to 100% because we've got the older nickel cobalt battery. They don't really like to be charged to 100% all the time, and they don't really like to be below 10%. So we're just putting in the amount of energy we need for our next trip. So you set that up, and what that will do is, again, as first preference, it'll try to use your excess solar. So it'll try to charge the car as cheaply as possible. So it'll use your excess solar. If the sun goes down and the battery's still not at the capacity I need for my next day's trip, then it'll kick in and start pulling it from the grid. So again, really great feature because you're limiting the amount of energy you're pulling from the grid, but you're also making sure that when you jump in the car the next day or a couple of hours later when you need to hit the road, that you've got enough charge to do what you need to do. So I thought I'd just briefly slip in this slide really quickly on the Wattpilot app. So Fronius has decided to have a separate app for the Wattpilot charger compared to the home solar systems. And the reason for that is that there's a lot of settings that you can do in the Wattpilot app. So they didn't want to overcomplicate it, which is probably not a bad idea. So we'll show you a little bit more about the next trip mode and what that looks like in the app. But I just wanted to mention that there is a standalone app for the Wattpilot. It's free and it's downloadable from your Android or Apple App Store. So this is what setting the next trip mode would look like in the app. So you'll set your car's consumption. So you only do this once. So this is unique to your car. So if you've got a Polestar or a Tesla or an MG or a BMW, you put in the consumption that the average consumption per 100 kilometres. You set the minimum amount of charge that you need. So i.e. I need to go 150 kilometres and I need that by 2 p.m. today. So you put in those metrics, press the button and away it'll go. As I mentioned, it'll try to use solar first, and then it will use the remainder from the grid or whatever energy source you've got to make sure that the car's charged to that point by that time. Now, by this time, you're probably like me going, wow, this thing is awesome. It does everything. Well, there's actually some other things that it's going to do. Now, Fronius have mentioned there this is Q4 2022, so I don't know how this is going to happen. I'll need to ask Fronius this and we'll let you know in some future videos. But I don't know whether there's going to be a software update or upgrade where your installer could come back out and upgrade some of the software and you'll get this functionality, or maybe it's only available in later models of the Wattpilot. I'm not sure. But this one, dynamic load balancing, again, in some circumstances is going to be very, very valuable. So in our previous video where we spoke to Aaron, the charger installer, load balancing is becoming very important for commercial and home unit type applications where there's a limited amount of grid capacity available, and you might want to put in 4 chargers, so you need to be able to dynamically split the energy that those chargers are sucking. So if you've got one person at one charger, you want them to be able to get the maximum that they can without having a meltdown in that infrastructure at that location. But then if 2 more cars come in, you want to be able to give them some charge, but you obviously need to manage the load across those now 3 vehicles that are charging. So the Wattpilot is able to do that, or will be able to do that in the not too distant future. So as you can see on that slide there, if you had a couple of Wattpilot chargers at home, like I said, this is probably more realistic in a block of units type environment. You could have a couple of chargers and they will balance the consumption or how much they're sucking out of that infrastructure to make sure you're not blowing main fuses, overheating cables and all that sort of stuff. So again, may not be that beneficial just in a single home application, but it's really good to know that this sort of stuff is coming, because these chargers, I think, will be very attractive to that smaller office block work type environment. So look, that's it for pretty much the features, the benefits, the things that the Wattpilot can do. Let's have a look at this little RFID tag. So as I mentioned, I showed you that before, pretty standard like any other RFID. I'll pop a screen up I'll pop a screenshot up there that just tells a little bit about it, so you can buy some extra ones of these from Fronius if you like. Look, I think the big benefit of this sort of stuff is going to be in a work environment. So if you've got a small fleet of vehicles and you want to be able to track individual use, you'll be able to do that. But another place I think it's fantastic is in like Airbnb type environments or motel environments. So you'll be able to allocate an account or a particular person's stay to the RFID for that particular period. So if you provide EV charging at your Airbnb accommodation, there can be a big difference in the consumption. Now, if you've got a little car like mine that only pulls 7 kilowatts and it's only got a 42 kilowatt hour battery, I'm probably going to charge up overnight and I might use $10, $15, $20 worth of electricity. If you've got one of those really high capacity cars, a Tesla, one of the big long-range Teslas, or you've got a Polestar long-range, some of those sort of vehicles, you can be talking double the amount of energy consumed. So that's where the little RFID comes in handy, where you could start to track that, and you could either charge the customer for that in addition, or at least manage your consumption, so you've got a bit of an idea of how much those EV driving customers are using in comparison to all the others. Because let's face it, if you've got an Airbnb and you've got a 3-month electricity bill, you're looking at the 3-month end bill, you're looking at the average, you've got no idea how much those EV drivers are consuming. So this would be perfect. So just briefly talking about the communication, so how the Wattpilot communicates with the smart meter and the apps and all that sort of stuff. My regular viewers will know that I'm pretty practical and I want to be able to use this even if I don't have internet connection. Obviously, if I take this out on the road, I'm not using the smart capability because I'm not connected to my home solar, etc. But I do not need any other communication with this. This doesn't need to be connected to the internet to work. I can plug it into a 3-phase socket at a showground. I can plug it into my car. I turn it on and away we go. So the communication is primarily there for using when you're at home, linked to your solar system. So as it mentions there, it's not hardwired at all. It's all Wi-Fi connections only, and it works with your Fronius smart meter. And as I mentioned though, there will be an open source type thing, and Fronius have mentioned their Q4 again in 2022, that you'll be able to integrate that with other smart meters or other sort of open protocols, which are way above my head. But again, talk to your Fronius installer and they'll be able to give you some more information on that. So getting towards the end now, we'll just have a brief chat about how this would integrate with your home solar system. And as I mentioned multiple times, you're probably getting sick of me saying this, we will have a separate video which I'll run through and demonstrate how it integrates and how well it works with our home solar system. But I did mention that there's a separate app and desktop portal you can use for your Fronius solar system, and that's Solar.web. So we've got that obviously at our home, and I'm constantly glued to it looking at the import export and what we're generating and all that sort of stuff. So what you can do is, once you've got this Wattpilot and it's commissioned and all hooked up, you can add that to your Solar.web portal or interface as well. So you'll be able to see some of the stats coming through from your Wattpilot. But as I mentioned, you'll have this second app, the specialist Wattpilot app, where you'll set all your settings and do all your changes and all that sort of stuff. But you can get some of your output. So as it shows in this slide here, you know, you can see some of the consumption, look at some of the energy balances across the days. So basically what it does, it just adds the consumption of the Wattpilot into your home-based solar portal. And this analysis slide that I've got up there, this is way over my head. This stuff is just too much for me. But again, if you're really into this sort of stuff, you're going to be able to look at voltages per phase, currents per phase, power factors, device performance, signals, all that sort of stuff. So you could really get into that if you wanted to. So look, to wrap up, there's a couple of things that we've already mentioned. So I said there'd be an open charge point protocol, whatever that is. That's coming in Q4. According to Fronius. Now, I believe that that is where you can hook up to those third-party devices. That might even be things like Raspberry Pis and all that sort of stuff, so that people can really get in and play around with the data. We mentioned before, you've got your residual current devices, so fantastic. All that safety stuff is built in. You don't need to think about it. And also, it doesn't cost you any extra. If that wasn't in this unit, your electrician would need to put that sort of stuff separately in on your switchboard or your connection. So already built in, which is great. Phase and voltage reading, as we mentioned, it's self-aware. I think maybe that's not the right words for it, but it detects single phase, 3-phase, so it can change between those. Anti-theft device. Now, I want to know about this one, so I've asked Fronius and I'm just waiting on some more information. We'll cover that in a future video as well. But I want to be able to know that if I've got this thing hanging on my wall charging and I've gone for a walk down the street, I want to be able to know that I can lock that little sucker on the wall and I don't come home and someone's knocked it off. Because these won't be cheap. And just on the pricing, as I mentioned, the Fronius sales model currently is these aren't sold directly to retail customers. So you will need to contact your Fronius dealer or installer. I'll put a link in the show notes to a Fronius link to that, so you can find your local installer in your area. So as far as pricing goes, at this stage I can't give you a price of what it'll be in Australia. I'm assuming that if you were getting a solar system installed and you were getting one of these installed at the same time, etc., your installer would give you a pretty good deal. So it really makes sense if you do have an EV or thinking of getting an EV and you don't have solar, that you would sort of get this as a bit of a bulk buy. But yeah, look, at the moment, unfortunately, I can't give you a price. If you do jump online, you'll find some European pricing. How that relates with exchange rates to Australia, I don't know. But again, if I can get some sort of recommended retail pricing from Fronius, I will include that in a future video. And of course, temperature. The charger needs to be aware of its operating temperature. As I mentioned before, if it gets too hot, it will actually reduce the capacity of charging. But I think that 40-41, that's a bare minimum in Australia, so it's good that Fronius have met that. It'll be really interesting to see, once these things are out in the field and working, just how well they work at those top temperatures, because I know some of the other home chargers, Zappy for instance, there's been some reliability issues with that here in Australia with the home chargers. So time will tell, but at least they've got that plus 40, which is a very good start. Well guys, that's it. As I mentioned, I'm super excited about this charger, and I really can't wait to get my adapter, get it installed. I've spoken to Aaron, who we done the interview with. He's going to come up from the Gold Coast and actually help me do the setup and the app and that sort of stuff. He's keen to learn how they work. So yeah, really looking forward to putting this through its paces. As I said, we'll be setting it up with the home mount at home, but we'll also be taking it out on the road, and we'll be trying it at various different locations with the adapter and also directly into 3-phase, and we'll be just seeing how it works. So yeah, over the next couple of months, really looking forward to sharing with you guys how this little baby goes. But super excited that we've now got a portable smart charger in the Australian market. Well, thanks very much for watching. I really appreciate your support. Don't forget to leave lots of comments. What do you think about this? Is this a charger that you would find really useful? Or would you just prefer your home charger on the wall and use public rapid chargers? You're not that interested in using a portable charger like this. You might only travel on the east coast of Australia and you don't need to be worrying about finding 3-phase plugs at caravan parks, etc. But if you're heading out west or off the beaten track into those regional areas, that's when these sorts of chargers really come into their own. So yeah, let us know. Would you buy one? Are you interested in looking at these further? What sort of money would you pay for it? Do you think the 5-pin 3-phase plug is the best way to go? And also, what about the home version? Would you consider the Wattpilot as a home charger in comparison to the Smappy and the Zappy and the Tesla Gen 3 wall box? So please let us know. If you'd like to flick us a couple of bob, I'll include the links to our Patreon and PayPal down below. As we mentioned before, if you're not a subscriber to the channel, please click that subscribe button. It's an easy, free way to support us, and it really does make a huge difference. Hit that bell icon so that you're notified when all of our new videos come out. And other than that, stay safe, look after your friends and family, and we'll talk soon. Cheers.